Okay guys, so Dave, take it away.
All right, so time permitting, I'm going to get into the hairspray technique, which is part of the scratching technique and the weathering. So one of the keys thing, even though I'm going to spray now and we're going to wait half an hour and then deal with it, I'm just going to show you guys scratching on a piece of armor here, but I have to do a little prep work. There are products on the market through MIG and through AK that talk about weathering effects, is what they're called. I'm not sure if it's hairspray in a jar or what it is. You can buy it at Hornet Hobbies and local hobby shops, I'm sure. I still have half a can of hairspray here, so I just continue to use the hairspray.
You don't need
but
much.
Like I say, no, you're right. But there are different products on the market, which is basically hairspray in it, brought out by MIG. So if you're going to hairspray the model for a weathering technique, such as if you're going to do a Panzer III in the desert, a lot of those Panzer IIIs began as a Panzer gray color, and then they painted them brown afterwards. And then with the sandblasting of the Sahara and whatever, you'd see the wear and tear come through the brown, and then you'd have that exposed Panzer gray color. To achieve that, a lot of us have gone to hairspray to do that. And what happens is you paint your model the Panzer gray, spray this on the next day. It's not, the lapse of time in between shouldn't be instant. Don't paint it Panzer gray, wait 10 minutes and then put this on it, put the brown on it, and then try to scratch it. It's not going to work. These chemicals here, these Tamiya paints, and I normally use Tamiya or Mission Model paints, they're going to take a little bit of wicking off time. So you're going to have to cure your Panzer gray overnight, or at least 6 hours anyway. So these two tanks have been painted in the last couple months. One with weathering before the hairspray and one without, and there's a reason for that. When Anthony called up to ask if I would come and do a talk, I started preparing a few tanks for this evening's clinic. So what you have to do, and I'm going to actually weather these with winter camouflage over top of green. So forget right now what I said about the Africa Corps and the Panzer IIIs. I'm going to put white winter effects over top of these two green tanks. One of them is weathered and one of them is not weathered. So the KV1 here is the one that is not weathered. And you'll find that the result on this one is not going to be nearly as nice as the one on the Churchill. So, but here's the mind block that a lot of modelers have. They get it to this point, and then they're going to put the hairspray on and then put the white on and scratch it clean. The trouble is, unless this KV1 that you're trying to do just came out of the factory, it isn't going to work. It isn't going to look as effective as, say, this British Churchill, which has all been weathered. Now I'm going to put the white effect on it and then scratch it off. And what's going to be exposed, of course, is the weathering that is from the summer before and the fall before they put the white on it. So it's very important. And like I say, here's the part that we should do is weather this KV1. I should put it in front of the camera here. Weather the KV1 as if you're not going to put any whitewash on it. Do a little chipping and a little bit of oil wash and all those things. Let them dry overnight, or maybe even a couple days if you're going to put the oil wash on. Then tackle putting the white paint over top of it and then scraping it off. So it's important to do that. The results will be way better. just think of the tank itself. It didn't come out of the factory in snow white paint. It came out of the factory in green paint, got weathered. And one of the other things talked about, and not enough, is these tanks don't get hit with shells, but the shells, explosions, land close by, artillery shells or what have you. So an artillery shell will land 10 feet from a tank. Well, what happens with all that earth and pieces of root and tree branches and all that stuff is they land on top of the tank. One of the things that a lot of guys don't do is think of the shells that are near misses. And so you have to weather the tops of the tanks as well as the, you know, in around the running gear and what have you. So just keep those things. You're going to try and tell a story, especially if you're a diorama man. You want to create a little story within your tank. So think about those shells landing around and artillery blasts and pieces of building and brick falling on tanks and all those stuff. So in the process of weathering, all those things then are scratches, and that's what I'm going to show you guys. Now, one of the things with the camera work tonight and the guy sitting at the back is you're not going to see what I'm about to do. It's a very, scratches are one of those things in the hobby that armor guys do, and sometimes they do them way too heavy. If you think of a 35th scale scratch, but the guy puts it on his tank as a 1-to-1 scale scratch. I mean, you got to really turn yourself into a 35th scale guy and picture how small these scratches are really going to be. So I'm gonna jump ahead so that I can prepare these tanks to put the hairspray on, and then we'll get into the scratching. But just keep in mind that what I'm about to show you, and like I say, might not show up on our wall thing here, and if you want to come in, please do. But just keep if you put 6 or 7 scratches on your tank, you're probably good to go. If you start burying it in sort of under, as if it was parked under a caterpillar, tent caterpillar thing, and all those little scratches look like little caterpillars all over it, again, your model's not gonna turn out the way you wanted it to. So just keep all that in mind. Less is better. Now I teach a class at Hornet Hobbies Sunday mornings, 8:45 till sort of 12 or so, and I tell all the students, and it's a 6-week class, but the hardest thing I'm going to teach them is scratches, because in the beginning everybody's going to do them too heavy. Everybody does. And when you guys go home to practice anything that I talk about tonight, don't do it on your brand new painted ready to go tiger tank that you're going to take, you know, down to Ottawa, you know, this fall. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to take one of these shelf queens and you're going to practice scratching and put 100 scratches on it. Practice and practice and practice, and then go to your major piece. As we all know, Sidney Crosby practices and practices. He was there 2 hours before all the other hockey players the other day, and there's no doubt why he's the best in the world. If you guys want to have the nicest tank on your shelf, what you're going to have to do is practice and practice and practice. There's no way that your models are going to improve unless you do that. So another thing not to do is don't neglect all those old shelf queens either. They have great value. You might not have looked at them in 5 years, but dust them off, repaint them, and practice. Just do all. See, the hobby's changed a lot. There's a lot more neat MIG products and hairspray and different things on the market now that weren't even there 5 years ago. So take advantage of those little models sitting on your shelves repaint them, and go to town practicing. And then you'll find that when you get back to your major one, your one for the shows coming up this fall, you're going to be able to apply these, but you've already had 20 hours of fooling around on another kit. It's really going to help. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hairspray these turrets, and then I'm going to let them be for about a half an hour, because the hairspray technique has to dry, and keep in mind I've got a lot of paint sitting on these. The hairspray is going to have to get into them. So what I'm going to do is, and this might be off camera just because there's a little bit of a fresh smell in this. Plus I don't want it to hit anybody in the face or in the eyes. So I'll just stand over here and spray these turrets.
Did you have enough lights?
Yeah, I'm good for the light.
Well, I remember Mike Rinaldi in the video we did with him that he was saying that he recommended an extra fine mist.
Yes, or I'm going to spray them twice. In a half hour's time, I'm going to spray them a second time, and then we're going to start chipping. So, so in that video that Mike did, half an hour before that video was shot, he sprayed them, and then sprayed them again for the video.
You can do them right there.
Okay.
Is that a miscode or just?
Yeah, that's a miscoded. It's pretty good coverage, and I'll explain why you have to do it twice as well. All right, so that's the unweathered turret. The KV1 is the unweathered one, and the weathered turret is the Churchill. So this Churchill is weathered as if no whitewash was going to ever be put onto it. I could take it to a model show just as it is, no whitewash at all.
Is it any kind of hairspray? Anything unique about it?
Okay, so that's a great question. One that needs answering. One of the brand name is not important, but the medium hold is important. If you buy the firm hold, which is a rock, it's for women that are going to go out near Niagara Falls, I guess. Who knows what the heavy hold is. And with different manufacturers, it'll tell you firm, or it'll use words of strength. Right. So what you're looking for is the medium in whatever brand name. Okay. So in this case, it's three stars out of 5, and this is what Mike Rinaldi always uses. 3 out of 5. Doesn't matter the brand name. You can even go to say the dollar store and buy this stuff, as long as you can find a medium. I've used dollar store hairspray too. It doesn't seem to have any effect as far as the end result, but just don't buy a firm.
What happens if you do?
It's just you just have to rub and rub to get it off. It'll just stay white, and you'll get teeny little scratches on it. Okay, so we're gonna leave those turrets alone sort of until shortly after 8 o'clock, after the break maybe.
Perfect. Okay.
And then we'll come back after the break and then put the white on them and scratch them off.
All right.
So in the meantime, now we'll switch to our German piece here. One of the things before scratching and heavy weathering is you have to get your paint on it. You have to have a little bit of a head start. And one of the things I like to do is to prime it in white. And there's a reason I prime them in white. I don't modulate my models too much. I let the white do the talking for me. And I spray with about 70 to 80% thinner. So I basically spray transparent paint onto my tanks. And so I use 80% thinner. This is in all colors. This is in all the spraying that I do. Sometimes it's 70, but unfortunately in my spraying place at the shop or at home, it's somewhat like Frankenstein's lab. I don't really sit there and mix with measuring cups and all that sort of stuff. After 25 years of airbrushing, I sort of know what 75-25 looks like. Now if that's, and it probably is new to everybody spraying at that kind of weird spray ratios, I would measure myself. If you haven't done it before, measure. And don't worry that it's going to run down the side of your tank and all that sort of stuff. Because as long as you keep your hand moving, because I set the PSI at around 20, you're not going to have any running down, even though it's 70 or 80% thinner. It's not going to run all over and look like crap momentarily. When running happens on your tank, it's because you're moving your hand too slow. You can move your hand slowly across a model, providing you drop the pressure down to, say, 10-ish. If you want to do a little bit of special weathering around these exhaust stacks, you can lower the pressure down to 6-7%. Move your hand very slowly, because the paint's not catching up to itself. It's only 6 or 7% PSI, so you don't have to hurry your hand across the model. So in this case, I'm going to paint this yellow in a minute. I'm going to be moving my hand swiftly across the top. So there's going to be no running, because there's going to be no slowdown. There's going to be no stop. But what I do is I pre-shade it, and in this case, dark gray is what I've used, and that will be evident, the lighting here, obviously for the camera. It doesn't show up why I used the light gray or the... Now you can also use khaki green. One of the colors I just don't use is black to do the pre-shading, and that's only because I find in the end your tank can, especially on aircraft, it kind of gets in the corgi metal models kind of category if you pre-shade with black. Now a lot of colors have similar values. Like if I use, like in this case I used gray, but olive drab will have the same sort of value as far as color goes, depth of color. So don't worry that you don't have any gray in your box when you go home to try this tonight. Just pick up an olive drab to do it. Or take, if you only have black, mix a little white with it to get, you know, a dark gray. So that's the pre-shading purpose. And the pre-shading, it's just another layer that you want to add before you start all the other weathering. And all you have to do is look at a model that isn't primed and isn't pre-shaded to realize that maybe the guy should have done that. But all these, as you guys know, I'm probably preaching to all you guys, even though you guys already do all that stuff. So, but I'm sort of just filling in some gaps for those who might be new at this. It doesn't take very long to airbrush the tank and put the gray on it. It just is an extra beautiful little shadow.
There's a question from Doug.
Andy, you're talking about thinning. Now, we'll talk to Maya, let's say. Do you actually use a thinner, or do you use distilled water?
Okay, I use actually lacquer thinner. To me, a lacquer thinner. There's another great product on the market which is very hard to find. It's made by Gunzy, and it's called leveling thinner. It's, I think, lacquer based as well. But what happens when you use lacquer on these Tamiya paints? It slows down the drying time just by seconds, just by 4 or 5 seconds. And what happens is the paint levels. The paint smooth. It doesn't. If I use X20, which is standard Tamiya thinner, the paint molecules are almost drying on the way to the model. and it could create something they call orange peel. What lacquer thinner does and what leveling thinner does, it has a retarder in it. And the retarder slows down that drying time, like I say, by 3 or 4 seconds. And those molecules sit on the model, and then they spread out. And what happens is you'll never have orange peel. None of my models, I don't think, in 20 years have had any orange peel. And I think it has a lot to do with the thinner that I use, and plus do the volume of thinner. You know, it's and the other thing. Now, I would suggest, and you guys can, I think most of you will agree with me that, say, from Windsor to Ottawa are probably the best maulers in the world on a whole. There isn't, sure, there's the odd Spaniard that's a very good modeler. There's Bill Horan, who's a great figure modeler. He's in California. There's this modeler and that modeler. But as a whole, if we all hopped into Greyhound buses and went to these shows, and we've all done it, we've gone to BuffCon and we've gone to the US Nationals, the guys who win the most awards live between Windsor and Ottawa. Now, why is that? Is it because we have more snow than other people? And we model longer? It has a lot to do with the fact that we all communicate with each other very well. We all are friends in this hobby. We all learn from each other, and we all go over to people's homes and experiment, fool around with things. Unfortunately, with hobby shops drying up in the United States, there isn't that Saturday morning little get-together where all the guys are shooting the shit and they're talking about 70% thinner and lacquer-based paints, and because there's no hobby shops in the United States. So you can't sort of go to your local little hub and shoot the breeze, have a coffee, and fortunately, like I say, between Windsor and Ottawa, nobody seems to have any secrets. We all, you know, if I have a problem with something and I have a topic of an Abrams tank, I can call Larry and him and I can talk on the phone for an hour. And so there's so much of that going on here that the result is all the great maulers that we have. And I've recently seen a Pershing, M26 Pershing at the hobby shop on last Saturday morning. It's one of the nicest 35th scale models I've ever seen. And I see a lot of models over the desktops at Hornet Hobbies. But I also get guys bringing in other little things, automobiles and figurines and stuff like that. And again, it's because we all communicate together. It's a huge neighborhood between Windsor and Ottawa, as far as, I don't think there's a secret out there. So Doug, that's a roundabout way of how did I start using this, and why 70% and everything. It's just communication amongst the guys. And now I've got so many guys using 70% lacquer thinner now, because I own a hobby shop and because I talk to hundreds of people a week. Using this at 70% isn't something you're going to learn on the internet. You're not going to be able to go home tonight, hop on the internet and say 70 or 80% thinner. It's crazy. But fortunately, we have guys in our hood like Tony Bell and Duncan McIntosh and all these. I can go on and name you 20 guys that if you pick up the phone, they're going to help you with a finishing circumstance that you want to accomplish on your tank, and you can pick up the phone or you can email 20 guys and they're going to give you all these. So now I'm getting way off topic here. I better paint. We'll be here till midnight. How's our time?
4:45.
Okay, so we're fine because it's not going to take me much to. Okay, so one of the other things that I like to do is gloss white is my color. I also, like whenever I'm gonna thin down, say German yellow, I always use gloss colors. I also mix Tamiya clear with all my paints. So I just found that through all photographic reference of contemporary armor, and of course we're dealing with black and white in World War II, but tanks are not flat. There's Years ago, I was in the interior design business, and we always called that an eggshell kind of color. And there's different grades of eggshell, just like there's different grades of flat paint. Some flat paints are flatter than others, moving into the scale of eggshell. Most tanks, because they're wear and tear, guys sliding in and off of them in combat reasons or in rest times, they're wearing blue denim, or well, not blue denim, but they're wearing denim cloth, they're wearing cotton, and they're polishing the tank constantly. Whether they know it or not, whether they're sliding down the different areas of tanks, what their clothing is doing is polishing it. So, but if you look at any contemporary armor, I think here in London they do the labs, do they not?
Yep, that's right.
You can see the contemporary pictures of those labs. They're not flat. They're flat-ish, but they're not flat. They're on the borderline of eggshell. They're satin.
Semi or
So that's why I use, so whenever I modulate, I always use gloss white, which just gives me enough that it's not satin, but it's not flat. If I'm not modulating, I just use Tamiya Clear, which is number X22. And most of my German armor is done with XF60. So, mind you, there is a new brand of paint now, Mission Models paints. It's a very green paint, very user-friendly. You can have a house full of finches or canaries, and you can use Mission Model paint, and the lacquer is bye-bye. These are all bye-bye. If you switch to Mission Model paints, you can spray with your cat in the same room. And they have a great selection of colors as well. So I just wasn't going to come out here and talk to you guys for an hour experimenting as I went with Mission Model paints, because I've used it, but I haven't used it a lot. So before I get into the scratching, I'll just cover off some of this some of this white here. Any questions before we fire up the compressor? Is everybody good? All right. Like I say, Doug, it's Frankenstein's lab, and I'm sort of used to Frankenstein's lab. But don't measure if you haven't done this. Measure with a measuring cup. One of the things, I brought everything tonight except an airbrush stand. So I have one now. I have one now.
It's organic.
Only the best for you.
Unreliable.
The Cadillac model.
So I'm not in the modulating part of this Yag Panther yet, so thank you.
No problem.
All right, so another thing is common with what I do is I stir my paint in this gravity feed airbrush, and probably another no-no. It's better to measure in another vessel and pour the whole thing into here, but like I say, after 25 years I've just gotten used to mixing in here.
I'm gonna try and get you some paper towel.
No, I'm good. I don't want to accidentally. So I just don't want to bump these. Beautiful. All right. I'm probably I'm at 17 or 18 psi. Okay, so when it comes to painting over these dark gray lines, like I say, because there's about 70% thinner in here, it's basically dirty thinner is what I'm spraying. I don't want to cover up those lines. They're going to come in effect a little later. And so like a Zamboni, I just stay to the outside in the beginning, and then I'm going to alter the mixture of paint in here. I'm going to add a little bit of white, gloss white, and then fill in the middle. And that's just going to be my way that I modulate. I use classic modeling is masking. Masking takes forever. I mean, airplane guys who are doing those beautiful canopies and what have you, the masking is what it is. So Scott, the answer to your question is modulate it the same way, but just, and the reason I said make it smaller than you see it in the photograph is just because it's that much more masking. You know, it's you just want to do less. But if you want to be, and you see, I never take a photographic reference and model that particular model, simply because most photographs or most tanks photographed, you can't see the other side, so you don't know what's over there, and some other knob who's got some obscure little books found the other side, and then you're wrong, and you're so if I'm going to model a German piece of armor that says 813 on it, I'm going to make sure that I can't find any photographs of 813, and I'm going to make it up. 812 and 811 and all that in the column, I'm going to use those as my guide, but I'm going to do one that I can't find any photos of. Now there's guys that can't do that. Guys can't make it up.
Dave, the problem with that is, though, when you're dealing with, say, prescribed camouflages like NATO camouflages or sort of French World War II camouflage, which is, you know, a preset
pattern.
Which, as you know, is a friggin' nightmare to paint, you know, with black lines and shit like that.
Yep.
Then what are you gonna do?
Yeah, then you're jammed up. But the only thing to do, Dave, is to let's say you have let's say you have the right side of one French tank and you've got the left side of another. Use the two photographs.
But I'm just saying, when it comes to doing all the pre-shading and shit like that, you get kind of
Oh, I see what you're asking. Okay.
jammed up with that sort of
Yeah, you're gonna get jammed up with it. But the best thing to do is to not worry too much about the modulation and take advantage of the oil paints. And by adding white to them and by adding lighter colors to them. And cheat on your model when it comes to, say, French armor or
Well, they are right.
yeah, likely they're gonna be doing that. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys have a break.
Okay. Okay, guys, we'll have a break. 50/50 tickets are on sale.